You've probably spent a few minutes scrolling past a bunch of metal lathes, wondering which one will actually sit on your garage bench, stay steady when you're cutting steel, and still leave a little cash in your pocket. The truth is, the big-ticket lathes with endless specs can feel more like a gamble than an investment, especially if you're just getting into turning or you only need a machine for occasional projects. You want something reliable enough to survive a few miscuts, easy enough to set up so you're not spending a weekend just assembling it, and worth the money when you finally get to the first piece of metal. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Grizzly Industrial G4003G is a 12-inch swing, 36-inch distance between centers lathe that comes with its own cast iron stand. At first glance it looks like the kind of benchtop beast you see in a community college shop, but the real question is how it behaves once you actually plug it in. I dug into a handful of forum threads, skimmed through the occasional YouTube teardown, and compared it with a few other entry-level machines that people usually recommend. Here's what I found when you start thinking about real-world use, not just the spec sheet. First, let's talk about the footprint. The stand adds roughly a foot to the width of the lathe, which means you need a solid, level surface that can handle about 400-pound total weight. Most hobbyists end up placing it on a sturdy workbench or a concrete slab. The good news is the stand's legs have rubber feet, so you won't be fighting vibration if your floor is a bit uneven. In practice, that rubber isolation makes a noticeable difference when you're doing a light finishing pass on a piece of aluminum. No buzzing, just a clean cut. If you're in a cramped garage, you'll still be able to swing a 12-inch workpiece without knocking the wall, thanks to the 7-inch bed width. That width is a sweet spot for turning small shafts, bushings, or even hobby-grade CNC conversions, but it does mean you'll hit a wall pretty quickly if you try to work on anything wider than a half-inch stock. The spindle bore is 40 millimeters, which translates to just over 1.5 inches of clearance for the raw material. For most hobby projects, think making a set of custom knobs, small gear blanks, or a handful of model train wheels. That's plenty. The spindle itself uses a MT No. 5 taper, which is the same standard you see on many larger shop lathes. That means you can buy a decent range of aftermarket live centers and tool posts without needing a special adapter. In my own experience, swapping a cheap 3-jaw chuck for a 4-jaw chuck on this machine was a breeze, and the taper held up well under the modest torque you'll generate on an inch steel rod. Now, the power side. Grizzly doesn't publish a massive horsepower number for the G4003G, but the motor is sized for the 12-inch swing, so you shouldn't expect to tackle hardened steel with the same confidence you'd have on a 20-inch production lathe. In practice, turning mild steel or brass works fine at moderate speeds. You'll see clean chips and minimal chatter. If you try to push it with a tough alloy at the high end of the speed range, you'll notice a little dip in torque, and the chuck can start to feel a bit soft under load. That's not a defect, it's just the reality of a machine that's built for flexibility, not for heavy-duty machining. One of the hidden trade-offs that often gets missed in the marketing copy is the speed control. The G4003G uses a variable speed motor, but the dial only gives you about a 10-step range. For most hobby applications, those steps are enough to dial in a clean cut, but if you're looking to fine-tune surface finish on a delicate aluminum part, you might spend a few extra minutes tweaking. It's not a deal-breaker, but it's something to keep in mind if you're used to a digital RPM readout on more expensive models. Who should buy this lathe? If you're a beginner who's finally ready to move from a mini lathe or a Dremel to something that can handle real metal, the G4003G is a solid stepping stone. It's also a great choice for a small home shop that already has a bench and just needs a reliable swing. People who love making one-off parts like custom bike components, small-scale jewelry, or replacement brackets for a vintage appliance will find the size and cost very appealing. The machine also makes a decent platform for a low-budget CNC retrofit. The standard MT No. 5 taper means you can mount a basic rotary table and start experimenting without a full custom build. Who should skip it? If you run a small business that needs to produce dozens of identical parts per week, or if you regularly work with large stock like 2-inch steel bars, you'll quickly feel the limits of the 7-inch bed and the modest motor. Similarly, if your workshop is